Les habla Pocho Salcedo y damos la bienvenida a nuestra audiencia en Latinoamérica y los Estados Unidos. Una vez más, explorando con ustedes el ADN de las noticias regionales e internacionales. Todos nosotros hemos sido beneficiados de alguna manera por hombres y mujeres que han tenido la valentía de denunciar en el sector privado o público violaciones a la ley que afectan la salud, nuestra economía, seguridad o los derechos esenciales de los ciudadanos. Estos denunciantes de toda edad y trasfondo ponen en riesgo sus fuentes de trabajo, su propia seguridad y son objetos en muchos casos de acciones legales y presión de empleadores o gobiernos que comienzan sus ataques casi inmediatamente después de la denuncia y persisten a menudo por años. Hoy hablamos con Lewis Clark, el ejecutivo principal del proyecto de responsabilidad gubernamental, la organización líder mundial en la defensa de denunciantes. Esta organización presta apoyo a los delatores a nivel mundial desde 1977. Un invitado fuera de serie para un tema fuera de serie. Mr. Lewis Clark, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Lewis Clark actualmente es director ejecutivo y CEO del Government Accountability Project, el proyecto de responsabilidad gubernamental, desde 1978, habiendo servido primero como asesor legal, portavoz y embajador público de la organización. Antes de convertirse en abogado, Lewis era un ministro metodista y sus habilidades de asesoramiento pastoral y capacitación influyeron significativamente en sus elecciones profesionales. Recibió una maestría en divinidad de la Pacific School of Religion y su licenciatura de la Universidad de Evansville. Lewis se reúne con delegaciones internacionales para describir la metodología del Government Accountability Project, las leyes que se necesitan para proteger a los empleados que hablan sobre problemas y cómo usar la información para promover un cambio social progresivo.
Well, we'll start right away, and we will be talking about whistleblowers. What is a whistleblower, and what is the difference between a leaker or a journalist?
A whistleblower is a person who's working in an environment, so he's at the job, and he's essentially blowing the whistle on his employer. A leaker is someone who sort of sneaks the information out to the public, or outside the organization, but is not identified. And it's often not just about wrongdoing. There's other motives often involved.
Why is whistleblowing essential to democracy, or is it not? On July 30th, 1778, many years ago, the founders of the United States unanimously passed an American first whistleblower protection law. So it's been on the books for this nation, at least for hundreds of years.
Well, the First Amendment, that's right, is there. But if you're in a corporate environment, the First Amendment doesn't pertain. It's that the First Amendment only works for public employees. So it's a little bit limited. Plus, how our courts have interpreted a person's rights under the First Amendment is not adequate. So we've had to go with passing individual statutes or laws to add protection to whistleblowers.
And let me ask you, are motives important when you're looking at a whistleblower? Reasons to be a whistleblower probably range from selfless altruism to a calculated maneuver to hurt people or organization. Is that an issue, the motives, or shouldn't be?
Well, I think if we're talking about wrongdoing, the motives probably is not as important, because you just want to know about the wrongdoing. For example, if you're law enforcement, you want to know what's going wrong at the office, what corruption might exist there. But if you're talking about an advocacy for whistleblowing, then certainly the motives of the whistleblower is quite important, because certainly in our case, the American people are going to identify a lot more with a person whose motives is just public health and safety or anti-corruption. And these people want to do something about that corruption, as opposed to someone that has some petty motive of which people will find a hard time identifying.
You're one of the iconic organizations that has been dealing with whistleblowers for many, many years.
Yes.
And there's always this focus on very prominent cases, like the one that had a big impact on national security here in the U.S. For example, the case of Edward Snowden, which is still vehemently debated along the lines of whether he's a hero or he's a traitor.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit of detail as to how you were engaged as an organization with it, and what are your thoughts on Mr. Snowden?
Yeah, our focus, I mean, we did represent Edward Snowden, not about helping him to reveal the information, because he did that at one time very early on before we even knew who he was. But what we did is we tried to inform the American people about the value of what he had to say. And in other words, what our government was doing, in particular to the people who live here in this country, in terms of surveillance, in terms of gathering data about them, without their consent and without their knowing even that it was happening. So it was important. His message was important. And so we did get very much behind trying to carry his message forward, and also trying to change the attitude of the government and the American people about the value of what he had to say. And so we fought the idea that he was a traitor, and we don't believe he was a traitor. We think he was a absolute patriot, and that what he did was to inform the American people about what their government was doing to them.
And what is the current status of his legal status? Because the news that we have is that the government itself, the U.S. government, is still pretty strong about pursuing legal action against Mr. Snowden.
They certainly are. And so therefore he's not coming back anytime soon. And he's now in Russia.
There's always a discussion about expanding whistleblower rights. You made some reference early on. And in many cases, trying to avoid that those rights are weakened. What is the general status right now in the United States and across the world?
Well, we have 30 whistleblower laws now just in our national government. 23 of those are focused on corporations, and about 7 for government employees. And essentially, they're very broad. The protections that have been enacted are quite broad, and they cover most activities within the private sector as well as the public sector. If we're talking about illegality, tax evasion, public health and safety dangers, and in the case of the government, gross waste and gross mismanagement and abuse of authority. So the categories are beyond just illegality. It's really broader than that. And these protections are we have now thousands of whistleblowers every year who are taking advantage of the protection that these laws afford to our people and our citizens and to people that live in this country. In addition to that, more broadly, there is now a European directive passed by the Parliament with not unanimous support, but very strong support. And now 28 countries of the European Union have to have whistleblower protection within 2 years. and that whistleblower protection has to be comprehensive. In terms of other countries throughout the world, there are 70 countries that have whistleblower protections, most of which I don't think are adequate. Peru has a law, and Chile has a law, although only it's very limited. But other than that, Latin America does not have whistleblower protection.
Thank you. You were just mentioning Europe, and one of the whistleblowers blew open, very successful, the secret Swiss banking system that permitted U.S. citizens and citizens from all over the world to cheat their governments billions of dollars.
Yes.
How did that work out?
Well, so far it's worked out rather well. I mean, we were able to find out about thousands of tax cheats in terms of this country, and there was a threat of possible prosecution, but so far, I think because the public has been supportive of the whistleblower, they have not been able to take action against the whistleblower. But it's there was actually a whistleblower about 20 years ago who actually from Switzerland, also from the banking system, and the whistleblower there ended up having political asylum within the United States.
I think as we're talking internationally, probably there's a lot of cooperation among whistleblowers that are dealing with the trafficking of wildlife worldwide. Do you think that this crime could be effectively combated without whistleblowers?
Oh, well, I almost think that any crime, whatever you're looking at, needs to have protections for whistleblowers, because whistleblowers are what law enforcement depends on in order to find out what's actually going on. And so if there was a way to provide protection for these people, many more people would come forward about problems. And yeah, sometimes they might be wrong, but at the same time, more often in our experience, they're right about what they're saying.
We're going to go to a short break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about how do the whistleblowers, what are the best practices,
Right.
how do they contact, how they get protected, and what are those good examples that you can tell us about. We'll be right back. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we are back again with Mr. Lewis Clark, and he has dedicated his professional life to the defense of and protection of whistleblowers all across the world. And we were asking him before the break, what were those good practice, best practices for whistleblowers? How do they initiate contact? How do they protect themselves? What are those general recommendations, Mr. Clark?
Yes, probably the best thing that anyone can do is, from the time that they see wrongdoing that they're concerned about, is to keep a log about all their activity, because 99% of whistleblowers bring the problem to their bosses first or their fellow employees before they become really a whistleblower. And so therefore, usually they're identified. So if they're going to take additional step, in terms of whistleblowing, like contact law enforcement, contact members of parliament or Congress. And so if they're going to take that step, or talking to the news media, for example, if they're going to take that step, then at that point, they need to take detailed chronology of everything that happens to them within the workplace, because that's going to be an important record if they are challenging any kind of negative action that might be taken against them at the workplace. And another thing is to be sure that they're right about what they're saying. So they, even though the law really allows someone to be wrong if they are acting in good faith, it's much more difficult to defend someone if they're wrong. So they really do need to be right about what they're saying. And very often that means using their expertise to prove the point that that what they're saying is right. So they just need to make sure that their documentation is in order and their expertise is solid, and then taking detailed notes about what happens to them once they go public in any kind of way.
It is a very long process, and to start it right will just help everyone. Presently, we were talking about and reading accounts of wrongdoings in a global scale, like in the World Bank,
Yes.
where some whistleblowers uncover certain activities. Likewise, right at the border between the United States and Mexico, there are also whistleblowers. Can you tell us a little bit about what are those whistleblowers doing in those two instances?
Yeah, first of all, in terms of the World Bank, Paul Wolfowitz is probably the most corrupt president that has ever been in charge of any kind of development bank. We had 40 whistleblowers that came to us about activities at the World Bank that were highly questionable and in some instances illegal. And so, for example, one person revealed to us the personnel records that indicated that his Paul Wolfowitz's girlfriend received an illegal $50,000 raise, and then I think the next year like a $30,000 raise, and that Paul Wolfowitz personally engineered that raise. And we had all the documentation about that. And even though our president of the United States at the time and our vice president were actively involved in trying to get him not to resign or be fired, we won that case. It took 7 weeks in terms of us raising all these concerns, but eventually he was forced to resign because of this wrongdoing. In terms of our own borders right now, the American people are finding out about what is going on in terms of the health of the individuals who are being detained, and what's happening in terms of the abuse of children. We have health officials, doctors, as well as other clinicians who are reporting to us about the unhealthy conditions and about the abuse of solitary confinement, and about for example, vaccines are being given to children that are adult level vaccines, and they're being given to children just because of incompetence. And so we're reporting all this to the media, and it's been brought to national attention. Congress is holding hearings on this. We'll see where it goes. But right now, the information that they're telling us about what's happening with it, including the separation of families, is startling to the majority of people in this country.
You dealt with many whistleblowers. What is the psychological impact on them? And normally society doesn't get on board right away. They think about the motives. They think about whether this is good or not good for society, or especially in issues of national security. That has to be taken a huge toll on the psychological well-being of the whistleblowers.
Yeah, it certainly does have a serious impact on people on the job who are going through the kind of stress that often occurs when they raise concerns. What we advise people is that they should tell their families what they're intending to do, so that the support systems are going to be around those people, and their friends as well. I mean, but just to help get through what they're going to be facing. We also, of course, warn some people that they just shouldn't do it, because we don't. Our own personal opinion is that we don't think that they are going to be able to get through that process in a healthy way. Other people, I mean, most people can, as long as they have that level of support. And I would say that there's no question, it's incredibly stressful. And one of the things that happens within the institution is, of course, these people are treated often now as pariahs, and they don't know who they can trust. And so one of the things that we tell people is everyone's not your enemy at work. So even though people are no longer wanting to have lunch with you or no longer want to be seen with you, that doesn't mean that they're part of the management. It doesn't mean that they themselves are going to be, are on the other side. And so we tell people that because we don't want the whistleblower to be creating enemies and thinking that everyone's an enemy. What happens is that if there's an opportunity for those people to, under oath, talk about what's going on, they will tell the truth. So their former friends at the office, they're under oath, they're not going to lie for the boss. And so they will eventually be okay. But it's a rough go until vindication happens.
Mr. Clark, we wish to thank you very much.
Absolutely.
For the time, a whole life you have dedicated to strengthen the protection for whistleblowers, and you've been in every major fight to defend those rights. And we thank you, and we thank your organization for what you're doing, not only for the United States, but wherever your services have been needed.
Thank you for this opportunity to share with your audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we have Mr. Bowen here from Dallas, Texas. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Pocho.
Mr. Bowen, after you made public the wrongdoings at Citigroup for 18 months, culminating in November of 2007, you found yourself engaged with powerful regulators, the SEC, the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission, and others. How important was to have a competent and trusted legal team on your side?
Pocho, thank you for asking that. I cannot stress enough to anyone that is out there that is considering blowing whistle on a situation. I cannot stress enough the absolute importance of seeking legal counsel. And this is before you ever even say anything. And I can tell you that from my own mistakes, because I actually blew the whistle for 18 months without legal counsel. I sent thousands of pages of emails warning management. And the only time that I finally got legal counsel was when I finally went to the board of directors, directly to the board of directors after 18 months. And they stripped me of my responsibilities and told me not to come back. And that's when I sought legal counsel, and that's too late. I had the legal counsel that helped me some with the bank. They also helped me some with the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission. I had another legal counsel that helped me when I went to the SEC. And believe me, leaving the company and going into the government is an entirely different dimension. The important thing that I learned from my first two attorneys is that the attorneys very quickly figure out which side of the bread the butter is on. And trust me, it is never the side of the whistleblower. Now, that's the private attorneys that I dealt with. The only reason that I survived today, and I'm able to be here today with you, Pocho, and talk to your audience and try to seek some changes to prevent another financial crisis, is because I was introduced to the Government Accountability Project. Once they became my attorneys and I got to know them, and they are just incredible people, beginning obviously with their executive director, Lewis Clark. They did not have a hidden agenda. And that, for one thing, instilled in me a tremendous self-confidence that I had some people behind me covering my back, giving me trusted advice that I could follow. And that, again, is the only reason that I have survived. Quite frankly, once you leave a corporate setting and go into the government side, it requires an entirely different skill set. Not that you don't need the basic legal advice, but you need someone, an organization like GAP, quite frankly, that understands the government. They understand the regulators. They understand congressmen and the powers that be in the regulatory environment. So please, if you are considering blowing the whistle, seek competent legal counsel that you can trust. That is my advice, Pocho.
Everybody who was impacted and could be impacted by a new financial crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pocho. My honor.
La importancia del denunciante y de su protección es clara, es un elemento esencial en el funcionamiento efectivo de una democracia y es una herramienta clave para la lucha contra la corrupción y el mal uso del poder, sea en el escenario privado o en el escenario público. La percepción de la sociedad y del sistema legal del denunciante debería ser de protección, ya que en la gran mayoría de los casos son hombres y mujeres que ponen gran riesgo para afectar la vida de la sociedad para una vida mejor. Hasta una próxima oportunidad en que podamos explorar el ADN de las noticias.